This is Victoria Mattingly, and I'd like to welcome you to the SIOP Conversation series, where we talk with leading industrial organizational psychologists and affiliates about the work that we do. This is episode number 33, and we're talking about science for a learning workplace. Today, our guests will bring fresh perspectives on how to effectively partner with leaders and teams to co-create healthy, mission-conquering, and forward-leaning organizations. Welcome to the SIOP Conversation Series podcast, Jason Kinney.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. V. I've been looking forward to this.
So have we. Thank you so much for joining us. Jason, a little bit about Jason's background. He's an organizational development professional and executive coach at NASA's Langley Research Center and has received corporate, collegiate, and national awards for contributions to the development of high-quality leaders. His graduate degree is in organizational leadership and learning, is augmented by professional credentials in organizational development, coaching, training management, design thinking, and one of the highest regarded trade apprenticeships in the nation. We are so thrilled for you to join us here today.
All right. Well, thanks again. I've been looking for this. And, I also want to thank everyone for the flexibility in rescheduling this from January. That was quite a ride. So I'm ready to go.
We're all about work-life accommodations. We would be hypocrites as IO psychologists if we didn't accommodate. So we're so happy that we're able to make it work for this month.
Right on.
And also, it's a treat to have you, especially here today, Jason, because you are our first non-IO psychologist. You're an affiliate, a new member of our affiliate program here at SIOP, which I think is such a great advantage that we're bringing people into the organization that are our key partners and are doing a lot of the work that IO psychologists do without maybe having that formal degree. And so we're super thrilled to have an affiliate join us here today.
Awesome.
Well, to start our conversation, we'd love to hear about your professional journey. So what spurred your interest in leadership and organizational development?
Oh, well, I definitely like your use of the word journey there. I suppose it kind of implies this sense of maybe intention, some sort of plan, but with enough room for curiosity and risk, which has pretty much been the story of most of my career. And kind of this healthy dose of, what's next, I wonder what it's like to do this, that kind of thing. So for me, that journey has brought me through, I don't know, maybe I'll just call them stages or something like that, but it's kind of like this movement through figure it out, right? Go explore and figure out these different things that you want to get involved with, and then just go start doing them. And then, really do it. Like, go practice, go spend some time camped out in this world of work that you're doing. And then probably the most rewarding part, which is kind of where I'm at right now, is keep doing this, but bring others in, right? Meet them where they're at, and set them up to do that stuff or whatever it is they're doing very well. And this has brought me through quite a roller coaster ride, pretty dynamic. I did not start in this kind of work. I don't even know if career is the right word to call it, but it's kind of navigating through this world of coaching, athletics, retail management. I went through several different apprenticeships. The one that you mentioned, which was in sheet metal and nuclear carrier and submarine construction, but then also in marble and granite work, and welding. Music and sound technology. I spent a stint doing that, construction management, being part of full-time ministry early on, which involved an immense amount of improv and acting and skits and pies in the face, things like that. Teaching, spent a good stint in academics, teaching at the college level, project management, training management, apprenticeship, workforce development, management. And then all that started to get me into this collaborative space with people that were in this field of organizational development, psychology. And it ignited something, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's when I really started moving into to more primary focus on leadership development, organizational development, really honing in on skills like facilitation and consulting, coaching. When I when I rattle these things off, it sounds, I guess, quite humbling. But laced throughout these experiences, it's been probably a similar ride with academics. Right, I started a major in math, and multivariable calculus quickly convinced me to move away from math. So I switched to architecture, and thanks to my dad and some others that inspired me in that field, I kind of pursued that for a little while. But then I dropped out. I dropped out of school because I got involved with this organization called Young Life, which some of the listeners might know. But that brought me into this world of training and counseling and coaching and mentoring and what does it mean to show up in a person's life and just be there and be present and watch a relationship grow from that, and invest in a person through that. And so then I got married and we had our first daughter, and all of a sudden education became important again. So I went to school for business, and then through the work, really discovered the psychology piece. And leadership and org development and coaching, and went to graduate school to really focus on those, which was really in human behavior and, the science behind that and applied in organizations. And just been really blessed to have organizations spend a lot of money on me getting certifications and to augment, a lot of that work. But every day, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but really every day I wake up and I'm like, all right, I've got this bag of stuff. What do I get to pull out today? Right? What do I get to lean on and to just pour in to the people that I'm interacting with every day? So that's kind of been the career piece. What got me interested in leadership development? That, I was on the receiving end early in my career. In kind of that leadership and management positions. I saw the heart that others had to invest in me through increasing responsibility, giving me more challenges, inviting me into roles that really stretched me, and then investing through mentoring and coaching. And as I matured in management and leading, that desire to reciprocate and pour in to mirror what was being done for me really, really grew and emerged, back to that kind of fourth, help others do it.
Yeah.
But, there was probably, I'd say many people, but there's one person just real quick that when I got into middle management, I was assigned to coach. And this person, their motto was every person deserves good leadership. And man, did they live that motto out. And through her coaching, I discovered this set of talents that when it was switched on with attention, it ignited like this zone in me, or flow. There's people correcting me right now because it's flow, Jason, right? So, but that flow that not only brought this crazy value to the work of leadership and organizational development, but I really enjoyed it and I was really energized by it. In fact, what side of the room am I pointing on here? Can you see this picture right here? I don't know if you can see it.
No.
It's like if you can't, I just thought of it when I was talking, but it's basically a cheetah that's jumping over an elephant chasing a gazelle. And there, maybe you can see it now. And I feel like I'm rambling, but that's okay. But what this means to me is, using this coaching method that she taught me, kind of in the world of synetics, and it's a psychological space where you're working with someone and you're using imagery and things like that. She helped me to discover that I felt like a cheetah chasing elephants, right? In other words, lots of meat, but not really challenging, not really exhilarating or stretching me or forcing me to go to the edges of my potential. And basically, I needed a gazelle to chase. So ultimately, this turned into a career switch where I moved from being in leadership and management roles to investing in leaders in the organization. And that's really how the interest in leadership and organizational development grew, and how I started getting connected to this world of psychology and stuff like that. And so here I am. I'm still chasing.
I love that. And you have such a cool job. I think people are really, really excited about this particular conversation series because you now get to do this work at NASA. Literally, putting people into space. It's incredible. And so I know you said you wake up every day and you get to, what tools do I get to pull out of my tool bag? And I did want to make a quick call out as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner. We think about diversity usually at the group level, but your diverse background and all those experiences have contributed to where you are in your career to be excited about pulling out those tools. So I just wanted to make that little call out and how you've had such a rich background. And also for those students out there watching, thinking you need to have a one straight arrow and I'm going to be this and I have to follow this certain path. I think it's to our advantage to have that diverse perspective and experiences under our belt to have in that toolkit. But what does an everyday look like for you at NASA doing this work with leadership development?
Well, different, of course. Every day is different, but so there's kind of two layers. One is the true, pure organizational development mindset, and that is a holistic view of the organization, right? So it's really about looking across the organization, working with senior leaders and those in the trenches throughout the organization to ask some of those big questions around what is our narrative? Where are we going? What are we doing? And are we doing it well? Are we doing it at a level that is inspiring our people, but it also is continually improving our stamina as an organization, our stance, our lean forward, those types of things. Asking questions around the well-being of the organization, performance, those types of things. So that holistic view, and then applying some of those scientific methods in org development, like action research and good question asking and designing tools to go find out the answers to those questions, analysis, diagnosis, those types of things. So part of the work is, and this is where I could nerd out all day, is exploration. It really is. This is why it's my favorite word in NASA's mission and vision is the idea of curiosity and exploration, right? Because that's literally the role, is to wake up every day and get in front of leaders and say, huh? Right? Like, you said this, but I see this, or what do you mean by that? Right? Or you want your people to behave this way. Let's talk about how they're behaving now. What does that look like? Define it, right? So it's just getting into their hearts and minds and discovering where their hearts are for the organization. But then the next layer is really, how do you go out and design and execute and interact on a level that creates movement in the organization, right? One of the things we talk about in our team a lot, that the other person I mentioned who coached me, one of the words that she would use is the idea of going native, where the worst thing you can do in a role like this is become part of the organization, become part of the holding the responsibility of the outcomes of the organization, or the role of a leader, right? So it can be very tempting to do that. But if you can keep yourself from going native, man, you open up a whole door to enter in with that expertise of research methods, coaching, designing methodologies and tools, looking at maximizing the potential of people in the organization itself, being in the trenches and understanding the human dynamics inside the organization, and being able to apply those different sciences from either a psychological perspective or human behavior. It is incredibly intriguing. I probably get my hand slapped a lot, not even knowing it's happening, because in this type of work also, you do kind of enter into a lot of unknowns, right? I mean, you're kind of becoming vulnerable as a practitioner to help others be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But as long as you're rooted and you're centered on the reason you're doing that, it's pretty amazing.
I love that. And we have our first question from the audience, from Kyle. He asks, how do you get better asking meaningful questions that help find out potential areas of improvement? And so I know you mentioned the exploration. What are some examples of the type of questions that you ask to really get at that next level down, to get to that area of improvement? And thank you, Kyle, for that question. For those of you watching live, if you have questions, please be sure to put them in the chat. And if we have time, Jason would love to answer those for you.
Yeah, I love this because it probably is one of the most challenging parts of this work for me. And what I mean by that is there's two like ways you show up to ask questions. One is more from a consulting standpoint, where you bring in a type of expertise, like, for instance, organizational psychology. That comes with a set of tools where you can very quickly look at symptoms and things and start to immediately ask some questions of a leader to get them in a space where you're helping them uncover ways to implement tools or be a partner in designing some tools to go execute something in the organization. So one thing is from a consulting standpoint, where you kind of already have a framework for an answer or some sort of solution per se, that your questions are getting an understanding of their perspective on those things, helping them discover and bring language to the solution that makes sense for the organization, those types of things. So that's one kind of platform to be asking questions on. The other is more from the coaching perspective, where you're not coming in with solutions. You're coming in with genuine curiosity, like me right now. And I'm going to tell you, Dr. V, this is extremely tempting for me to not start asking questions, but being with someone like Victoria right now, being fully present and just getting 100% curious with them. So a leader asking questions about, why are we even having this conversation? What are you showing up with here, right? Mm-hmm. What is this symptom that you've identified? Let's explore that. And it's just letting curiosity take you down a path with that leadership. Both tend to end in a very similar place, where you're designing something. Now you're working through, or maybe the leader has a revelation now that they want to go exert energy towards, and you get to partner with them on that. So to go back, the first thing is your approach. Do you have a solution, or do you have at least some sort of an idea based on your expertise of what can already help? And so you're crafting questions to be a support to that leader and help usher them into that. The other side is more the coaching, where it's more about them discovering that for themselves and you being with them in that process. I don't know if that helps.
Oh, no, that was a great answer. Great answer. Our next question has to do with my question, which is around how you partner with IO psychologists. So this is a two-parter. The first question comes from Jarvis. How do you uncover allies for your cause? So discovering allies. And then relatedly, I know you work a lot with IO psychologists, and I see an ally partnership there. And so, talking a little bit about allyship, whether it's helping your coachees discover their allies, but also how you ally and partner with IO psychologists in the work you do.
Yeah. So the first part is, and again, this could probably sound oversimplified, but it's letting the work be the calling card in a sense, right? And that takes patience. It takes time. It takes investment. It takes building relationships. Now, of course, I'm an internal consultant in an organization, so there is a difference in being hired in or contracted into an organization externally. There's a little bit different dynamics at play there, because it tends to be a little bit more formal, the process, at least at the beginning, right? Not that it's not internally, but so the first part is the work itself, establishing trust and relationship with your internal leaders and teams, the community of the organization. I think the second part is real true consistency. So our mission as an organizational development team at Langley is to partner with the NASA community to co-create healthy, mission-conquering, and forward-leaning organizations, right? So those three things: health, performance, forward-leaningness, if that's a word, that's it. That is our foundation. And so everything we do and the way we interact with leaders, it plays into those things because they're all interrelated. So the consistency in that language and supporting them and being a partner with them starts conversations that echo across the organization. And next thing you know, it's not just people calling you up asking for help. It's you discovering forward. And so it's less about someone ringing a bell at a counter anymore. It's now about a true partnership where you're asked to be along with them in this process. So it's actually even less about uncovering allies. Really, it's more about deepening partnership, right? Which just creates more partnership and more relationships, which is, it's crazy. It's crazy awesome. And it's daunting too, right? It can be overwhelming, especially when someone hears about something and they want to partner with you, and you get tempted to slide into that imposter syndrome or something like that. And that's why you need to surround yourself with IO psychologists. The second part, what was the second part again?
Just how you partner with IO psychologists at NASA.
Yeah.
What do IO psychologists do at NASA? Enlighten us.
Yeah. They make sure that people like me don't screw things up. That's what they do now. Actually, NASA is pretty, and I was surprised at this when I came to NASA, because NASA's where I discovered this world of IO psychology.
Oh, wow.
And because I started meeting them, I started seeing what is this work people are doing in the organization, and they have this title and this doctorate degree in this. What is this work? So I just started networking and meeting people and discovering this world of psychology that's just embedded and focused on the humans in the organization and the dynamics of how that plays out across an organization in relation to an alignment with goals and strategy and things like that. So anything you can think of that an IO psychologist is hungry to do is probably being done at NASA in very specific realms. Now, with myself and our team, most of that work is kind of dancing around the organizational development function, so that holistic view of the organization and working with that community of leaders. But then also, our interns specifically are, on teams and are invited into these efforts and these initiatives at that strategic and tactical level to bring that perspective and IO psychology expertise. So they're seen as consultants, and they are truly leaned on and respected as consultants. So you could be in a meeting with executives and they're trying to plan a strategy for building community, for instance, and they're going to stop their discussion and they're going to ask that psychologist, what do you think? Like, is this jiving? Are we missing something? Is there a method or a model that we can latch onto here and deploy? So there's a lot of openness to that. But then also, in some of the more specific areas like DEIA, human factors, working directly with a lot of these, different teams that are doing the science, the astronaut corps, all these, IO psychologists are all over the place in that kind of work in different ways. Some of our core leadership are IO psychologists by trade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
IO psychologists getting people to the moon, getting people to Mars. I love it.
Yep.
So the theme of today's conversation series is science for a learning organization. And in what ways do you see your work as a leadership coach and in the organizational development really contribute to that learning aspect of the organization at NASA?
Wow. So just to reiterate, like the way you introduced me, I'm not an psychologist by trade. In fact, I like to consider myself more a piece of Play-Doh in the hands of psychologists, right? And I say that with a term of endearment, right? And so I've rubbed up against this work for a while, but I only recently discovered it as a focus field. And it started when I brought an intern in, right? I was curious. I found this intern that applied. They were in their doctoral program at Columbia. And if she's listening, shout out to you, because she really brought in the true, really brought in IO psychology to me personally in this work. And now 3.5 years later, it's who I tend to bring in as IO psychologist. All that to say, I started to get to know the field, and then, this kind of amazing focus on organizational development and psychology and the application of it across the dynamics of an organization were kind of eye-opening to me. So since then, and this person, by the way, has carved out such a level of respect that she keeps getting pulled back across some pretty amazing work. I think she's on her 1 millionth internship right now. But I saw the value in this role, both for the organization, but also for myself as well, as someone who just loves to chew on things and learn. So that idea of taking an expertise and getting it out in front of people so that they can get sharpened, and it introduces new concepts and ideas. And the wait a minute, I never thought about that before. Even people that have been professionally trained in some of these crafts that are people focused, that organizational psychology language starts to sound different and prompt them to be challenged and think of things a little bit differently. So that's one reason I bring that world of expertise in the work that we're doing is 100% so that we can stay sharp and that we're learning. Trying to think of a good example. I think through maybe osmosis or assimilation, right? There's been that overlap. And I think there's probably one experience, and it's just coming to mind, that probably wins the trophy for maybe igniting this momentum to dive into this work and learn and use it as a learning mechanism in the organization. A while back, I took a break from management and I went to teaching, and I was teaching courses in math and propulsion and ship construction, leadership, communications, just a bunch of odds and ends stuff. And in one of my classes, we dove into this concept of social norms. It was my favorite segment in all the classes I taught. So we would dabble with social norms in organizations, and it was incredibly fun. And one of the assignments during the class was to pick a social norm and purposely go violate it, like in the organization, this isn't just like a lab. This is like go out on the waterfront of a shipbuilding company and violate a social norm, right? And then come back and share, right? And it was crazy awesome. But the whole point was to learn. It was to understand how just the simple act of violating a norm has a ripple effect, a chain reaction in an organization when those norms have been established for such an immense amount of time. So the psychological side of that was very important. But the stickler was, I shared with this group that one of my pet peeves was when people violate my personal space. That's a social norm for me. That is, don't violate my personal space, right? So during a break, the student comes up and asks me a question. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, the class erupts in laughter. And I realized that I had backed myself into a corner of the room as this student, like a ninja, had encroached on my personal space during the conversation. And what I learned was that the class had designed an experiment on me, right? Using the exact same thing that we had learned in class. They used psychology on me, that I was trying to teach them the psychology of social norms, right? But the reason I'm sharing this is in this work that I get to do, it's a constant cycle of experimenting and asking these questions and learning about the people in an organization, like really, truly globally learning about where their minds are and their hearts are, but then also dialing back and using some of that expertise and surrounding ourselves with people that know how to think about what we learned and turn that into applied activity in an organization that helps to grow and develop.
Yeah, I love that. And something else I love is that you have a quote that is, every person is worth an investment. Could you speak a little bit about what an investment in development and learning looks like at both the individual and organizational level, especially with the work that you do at NASA?
I think maybe first I'll explain just real quick what that means to me. Every person has everything they need to matter. And this is something that's so deeply rooted in me and belief that I don't even care if anyone else believes it or not. But there's meaning in the simple state of being alive. There's meaning in the simple act of just showing up, right? So whether you're showing up to a herd of cows in a field by yourself or 50,000 people in a Fortune 500 company, we're all wired to bring something meaningful, right? We're all wired to create and go after something we believe in. So investing in somebody only builds on what's already awesome, right? Because they already have value, they already have worth. So whatever happens as a result of that investment is just one, just more of what they've already shown up with. So believing this brings me personally an immense amount of freedom to and resolve, and maybe the awe, right, when being with a person or team or leader or crowd or maybe some cows in the field. I don't know. But with that being said, I would say that investment in an individual is quite similar to that of an organization, right? In fact, as many of you probably know, the whole idea of an organization comes from the study of living organisms, right? Hence the word organization. So that the roots are in the biological study of organisms. And so a lot of the foundational elements of organizational development and organizational psychology come from how does an organism respond to stimuli and those types of things. But the organization, just like a person, exists for some reason. If the organization's, I don't know, maybe been around for a while, that reason may be extremely evident and clear and focused. Maybe it's been deeply buried in the DNA or culture or the norms that maybe have emerged over time. But either way, that initial formation came from some declaration of value, right? So some meaning, some impact that made it worth some initial investment that, might just have become skewed or lost or fragmented, right? And so then leaders start getting hungry to try to figure out what's going on. So most of the time, people go on their merry way, right, until they recognize, or organizations, till they recognize some sort of chasm in front of them. And whether it's, somebody else recognizing it first, or even better, you recognize it yourself, either way, the questions start to emerge, right, in different forms. What is this? What's on the other side? Is it worth exerting my energy to cross this chasm? How do I even do that, right? So however it begins, the investment is in helping that person or team or community or the leaders of an organization explore what it means to answer those questions, to get centered, to build a narrative, right? To design and deploy tools and methods and interactions, investments to help them move forward and realize their worth again, right? So it's a healthy dose of psychology and honestly just knowing how to love a person and knowing how to love an organization and be part of how they originally came together.
I love that. I love that. And someone had a call out. Everyone has everything they need to matter. So I think that really sums that up. One more question from the audience. I know we're starting to get down on time, but I thought this was really interesting. Have you encountered situations where the problems you're being asked to help solve require a complete revamp of the organizational culture? And how do you handle, whenever there is a cultural revamp that's necessary, when there's hesitance or resistance from leadership?
Oh, wow. How much time do we have? Well, maybe I'll answer that in two ways. First, the short answer is yes. Well, I'll say yes and. Yes, I've seen that happen, but it doesn't always come unglued the way that a textbook might or a case study might inform that it should, right? So that's part of that discovery component. A good example of this might be, and this is happening right now, where there is a researcher who is very well known, very good at what they do in this world of airflow dynamics, right? Stuff that we're all familiar with, right? But anyway, this person is in a leadership role, and they have started to discover that the future is going to require, I don't know if I'd call it a paradigm shift, but some real serious shifts in the way that people think, the way that teams operate, those types of things. So right now, that's not at a level of reorganizing the entire structure of an organization, right? It would result in that if that's pursued, right? The problem, though, is, and you may have heard maybe the term, can you sense the tide rising, right? And imagine, and we actually discovered this analogy together, the idea that you have a fishing village on the edge of a bank of a beach or something, and twice a day they pick up all their huts and their gear and they move inland because the tide comes in, right? And then they move it all back when the tide comes out. They've been doing this for ages and ages. Well, then someone looks up and says, hey, what's that thing in the sky? That's a moon. And then they notice the curvature of the earth. And then all of a sudden dawns on them that the tide can be predicted and that they can see when the tide's coming in and out. And so then they go to the villagers and they say, hey, I've discovered this. All we have to do is put our houses on stilts and keep our equipment up, and we can actually catch twice as much fish when the tide comes in. But the village is like, what are you talking about? A moon? Like tide? What's that? Stilts. I don't understand, right? So there's this immense amount of tension, and the work that we do is really in understanding how to nurture and cultivate the types of conversations and discussions that create the relationships and bridge, so that the discovery of what's needed for the organization starts to become the ideas of leadership, and into their psyche and to their mindsets, and discovering that the tide's rising and that they can attract that, and that they can shift things and move things around, as daunting as it feels. I know it sounds like I'm maybe moving away from the question a bit, but it can be extremely complex, but extremely simple at the same time. And it does take, and NASA, NASA's going through this. NASA is an amazing, amazing organization that is full of people that have been born and bred in innovation. It's in the DNA. Curiosity is part of what we do. But NASA is also extremely curious about its future, and wanting to be optimistic and wanting to be strategic and wanting to take care of our world and make the right decisions about how to lead forward in this space. But it can be very daunting when there's a lot of movement that influences the types of partnerships and relationships that NASA relies on, and that people rely on NASA for that. So it's now's a very important time for that. Very important for the field of work that we're in to come along and partner with leaders to help them be asking those big questions, knowing that it can be very fearful to think about some of those big things.
Well, and
I don't
having
think.
curiosity be part of NASA's values, that's really advantageous because I feel like whenever organizations go through culture shifts, a culture is an identity. And going through
Yeah.
a culture shift is it's an identity crisis. And so to have curiosity and exploration built into that identity allows for more of that learning, more of that innovative culture that requires this constant change. And so they're very lucky over there that they have you to help guide them through these changes because humans don't like change. We know that very, very well.
Yeah, it can be scary. It can be scary.
Jason, we are almost out of time. I'm curious, one final question from me.
Mhm.
What have been some successes or ahas that you've had working with IO psychologists? Just thinking about better ways of all the IOs tuning into this episode. How can we be better partners with the Jasons of the world, the OD specialists, the leadership development, the executive coaches?
Oh man. I think one of the revelations for me has been uncovering this idea that being a psychologist in an organization is this clever dance between both being a scientist and existing as the same type of subject that the science is curious about. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. We're studying ourselves.
Yeah, studying ourselves. And there's an immense amount of rigor and fascination around the science and what it means to investigate and ask and research and use some of those methods of research in an organization to collect data and analyze that data and have a data-centric approach to helping leaders understand what's going on in the organization. That all of that can be thwarted by one question or one sense of curiosity or one mistake in maybe a tool being used or a person not having the expertise or even an expert misunderstanding something because a dynamic was present they didn't quite see, right? So all that complexity and dynamics is so intriguing, but if you recognize it, it's also it makes things incredibly simple and freeing because you can do this work where there's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of training and a lot of expertise that surrounds the type of work that we're doing. But you can also do it and just also be a human while you're doing it. You can have a conversation that doesn't have to be full of the science, but also be doing the science at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And yeah. And that I think is what I've learned. And I think what I've learned from our interns and others in the IO psychology field is what this idea of being embedded really means in an organization is really not through the work, but through the behaviors as a human doing that work that really evangelize the concepts and the way of doing and how that work impacts the organization. Yeah.
Great. Oh, I could chat about what IO psychologists do at NASA all day, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. For those listening in live and those tuning in after the fact, thank you so much for taking the time to learn a little bit more about what the science of learning looks like at NASA through our amazing guest, Jason Kinney. Jason, on behalf of SIOP, all of our listeners, thank you for an engaging and enlightening conversation and for taking the time to speak with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And feel free to reach out. And if you're looking for IO psychologists, like real ones that to be on the program, let me know. I can definitely line some up from NASA for you, I'm sure.
Excellent. I love that. And for those out there, please join us for our next conversation on March 30th at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again for joining today's conversation, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day.